for me, I was thinking about it and I was thinking, well, self-advocacy really, I think, needs to be something that's proactive that happens before you get to that stage.
Welcome to the Redefining Midlife podcast. I'm Jo Clark and I'm so glad you're here. And this is a podcast for women who are ready to break free from outdated stereotypes, rediscover themselves, and embrace the endless opportunities that midlife brings. Each week, I'll share expert advice, actionable strategies, and inspiring conversations with incredible women who are redefining what it means to thrive in midlife and beyond. From health and wellness to reigniting your purpose and passions, this is your go-to podcast for feeling empowered, supported, and seen. And midlife isn't the end. It's your time to shine, rewrite your story, and create a life that you truly love. So let's get started. Welcome to episode 124 of the Redefining Midlife podcast. Now, I absolutely love bringing everyday women onto the podcast. Women who are doing extraordinary things, but whose stories often go unheard. The midlife women contribute so much to their families, their communities, and their workplaces, yet we're rarely in the spotlight. It's time to change that, because the more we share our voices, our experiences, and our wisdom, the more we empower not only ourselves, but each other. And today's guest embodies this in the most powerful way. When faced with a serious health diagnosis, many women find themselves navigating a complex and an overwhelming system, and they're often without the resources, support, or knowledge that they need in order to make fully informed decisions. It can be really isolating, it can be frustrating, and at times completely disempowering. But what if there was a way to change that? What if, instead of feeling lost in that process, women actually felt confident advocating for their care? What if they were equipped with the right tools, and what if they were supported every step of the way? Well, that's exactly what today's guest is helping women to do. And I'm joined by the incredible Luan Lawrenson-Woods. Luan is an award-winning patient advocate, podcast host, and a change maker in the world of women's healthcare. With her own lived experience of breast cancer and reconstruction, Luan has transformed the lessons from her own journey and her professional expertise in community-focused organisations into powerful resources for women who are facing some of their most vulnerable moments. In 2022, she launched Rewritten Me, which is Australia's first podcast dedicated to providing vital breast reconstruction information after a mastectomy. Through raw and honest conversations, she's given voice to the lived experiences of patients, highlighted the need for self-advocacy, and has created a movement that empowers women to take charge of their healthcare choices. And building on this success, in 2025, just very recently, she's introduced Regarding Me, a groundbreaking podcast which is dedicated to enabling women to become confident self-health advocates, not just in moments of crisis, but throughout their entire healthcare journey. Luan is on a mission to change the way women approach their healthcare, fostering open conversations and champion shared decision-making. That's a mouthful. She's creating safe, uplifting spaces where women can reclaim their voices and, as she puts it, put the me in the MDT, which is multidisciplinary team. Now, I know you are just going to love this conversation and you're going to walk away feeling inspired, informed, and ready to advocate for yourself in new ways. And remember, if you know another woman who would benefit from hearing this episode, make sure you share this with them. Now, let's dive in and meet the remarkable Luan Lawrenson-Woods. Welcome to the Redefining Midlife podcast, Luan.
Thank you. Thank you, Jo. Thanks for having me on.
It'll be a fantastic conversation to have with you because I know so much that you're going to be able to share and to bring information to all the listeners who are with us today. Now, you packed a lot into your 53 years, and sharing your story today is really going to help, as I said, many, many women. And could you just help us work out where you came from?
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously with an English accent, you've had a very different upbringing to many of the listeners who are based in Australia and or New Zealand. So tell us more about where you grew up and what life was like for you when you were younger.
Okay, thanks. I have to just say, when you said you're 53 years, I was like, 53, that can't be right. Like, where does that all go? Where does that all go? So yeah, as listeners will be able to tell, my accent isn't an Australian or a New Zealand accent. I'm originally from the UK. I'm from up north, as we say there, and I was born in Cheshire in the north of England. And I lived there for about 7, 8 years, so some of the formative years. But I did then move to where my mother came from, which is Lancashire, which is a mill town in the north of England, and grew up there and spent maybe the next 10 years or so living, with my parents before leaving home at a fairly relatively young age of 17, and sort of left home. I was thinking about this the other day, and I remember my mum was always like kind of encouraging me to be independent, and like, oh, you and Luan, or Luan as we say up north, you'll be leaving home at 18. And I thought, oh, do you know what? I'm going to take that independence a little bit further. And I left home at 17 and went kind of off to live on my own with a boyfriend at the time. But yeah, you can tell by that my accent is a little bit mixed up. The Cheshire accent is a different accent than the Lancashire accent. I've also lived down south, as we say, which is the opposite to up north in the UK. So
Yes.
my accent is a little bit mixed up. But I grew up, in the north of England, and left home at 17 without really much of a plan as to what I was going to do. I was really fortunate, went to a great kind of local school, but really didn't have too much of an idea of what I wanted to do at that time. I kind of sort of meandered around doing a year at college, and then it really wasn't for me. So at 18, I packed all my education in and I just started work, really. And I remember I had this amazing job description for my first job. I was a research statistician, and it was in the early days of Excel, before Excel was even launched, really. And that's kind of the job that I went into. And it sounds really fancy, but it wasn't a really fancy job. And it was something that became, I guess, really thinking of where I am now and how I've got here came really foundational to what I do, because I ended up working in a place that was very political. And got caught up in the politics. And I think that's quite unfair for many people. I thought it was very unfair for an 18-year-old to try and navigate that. And I moved on to another job. But that's kind of my first foray into work with not much of a direction.
Yeah.
I didn't have much of a direction for a number of years, I don't think.
And not uncommon for that age. It's so much pressure, isn't it?
Oh, right. And I felt that. It was like,
Pressure
you need to
children have got.
decide. Yeah. I'm taking my, they were the GCSEs. I was the first cohort to take GCSEs after they got rid of the O levels in the UK. And that was a bit of a chaotic. Nobody really knew what was happening. But being asked at that time to make some decisions, even before at 16, you're taking those exams. At 14, you're being asked to make the choices of what you want to study to do that. I think, oh my God, the pressure of it and the trauma of trying to work it out at the time, making those decisions was usually for a job for life, right? Or pretty much for life. It's very much changed now with the way technology has evolved. But yeah, so and I knew at the time, I remember thinking, I can't do this. I don't really know what I want to do. But particularly for my generation, for my background, and my family were really heavily, into education, because I come from a very working class background. My father's family from Liverpool, Dockers background, my grandparents didn't have the education that I had, but my father and his siblings, they managed to access, what's the equivalent of TAFE education, college education, and really got into sort of semi-professional roles through that. So education was always seen as an important thing for me, but there was always that pressure that you really need to decide what you want to do now at 14, what you're going to study, that's going to determine the rest of your life. And I remember thinking at that time, even then, that wasn't fair. How can I make that decision? I didn't even know how to kind of look after myself properly before I left home at 17.
Yes, that's so true. And so, Luan, how long were you working in England before you came to Australia? And what was that whole reason why you decided to move to the other side of the world, to something completely different and foreign to what, your life in England was like?
Well, I moved here in 2013. And the reason that I moved here is I came to study my master's in cultural studies. So even though university was never on the radar for me when I was 17, and really wasn't anything that my parents had encouraged, even though they were pro education, it never really went further than college education. I later on in life, in my late 30s, I decided that I wanted to go to university. I wanted to do a bachelor's, and I studied a bachelor's in cultural studies, culture and gender studies. Um, but very reflective of where I'd come from. Even though I did a degree, it was through college. I didn't feel the confidence that I could go to a university and do a degree. In fact, I didn't feel that I could actually start a degree because I didn't have the equivalent of A levels. I didn't think until I had an interview with somebody and they recognized all my experience, my work experience, that I had a right to kind of jump in on the first year of university. So I studied my bachelor's at a college. I loved it so much. I love education. I loved studying. And then I thought, I fancy doing a master's here and a master's in cultural studies. I really enjoyed looking at, popular culture, how meaning is made, how there's tension in meanings. And I became really interested in studying love and death, actually, those two kind of extremes.
Yeah.
So I'd been on holiday in Australia in 97, working holiday, and I discovered that Sydney, the University of Sydney, had a master's in cultural studies. So I thought, I wouldn't mind applying for that. And I got it. And we came with my husband, Vinny. We came to Australia in 2013.
Wow. And so what sort of jobs then? Because you spoke about how you didn't have your A levels, which is what you're needing for your university entry level in England. So what sort of jobs were you doing and in
Mhm.
what areas to lead you to have that interest? Oh, this is going to be my passion area. This is really what I want to follow.
Yeah, well, initially just admin jobs, right? I just went into local admin jobs, but then I moved down south and I worked for a company that was an e-commerce company, an e-commerce fulfillment company in the really early days of e-commerce kind of coming up, and I was an account manager. I managed accounts, some of the leading brands in the UK, and as part of that role, I was the first account manager with the client to use a new computer system that managed everything from one end to another. And it did not go well. It was chaos, absolute chaos. But what happened through that, and actually, this is where the theme of my life, I think, probably comes in. What I learned from that, I became a subject matter expert in that new computer system. And that new computer system was being rolled out for all the clients throughout the company. And I realized that I'd learned so much that I could teach others, I could train others how to use it. So what I'd learned and what I'd been through, I didn't want anyone else to have to go through that kind of real chaos where the client's really unhappy. You get called to the client's office and you get hauled over the coals because things have gone wrong. But also what I discovered as part of that process is that, this new computer system, everybody was using it, including people who were in the warehouse, and they were being asked to use a new computer system that they hadn't really been shown how to use. We would have people who never used a mouse, they didn't know how to use the hardware, let alone the software, to then do the job that they were being asked to do. And again, I thought that was, really, really unfair. So I moved into training, and it's one of my favorite jobs that I ever had was like, training and being the conduit and being the translator from the IT department into the kind of how do you use this system, almost like a business analyst role as well as a training role. And I really loved that. And then I moved back to Liverpool, but even though I'd loved training, I didn't want to be in the corporate world. I didn't like the culture and the politics that existed around that. And then I I decided I wanted to work in not-for-profit, and I worked for an organization that gave free business advice to women who wanted to set up in business. So I trained as a business advisor, and it was a free service, and it recognized the challenges that women have in setting up their business, whether those challenges and barriers are what for me seem very simple, but aren't necessarily. But just like the timing that you will have a training session. We used to have training sessions that would be after a school drop off, so that we didn't exclude women who had children and who were doing that. But my real passion was in community engagement, and I started to work out in the communities, engaging and talking to women to find out what their hopes and dreams were for setting up a business and how we could help them. And yeah, from that, I sort of really got some more confidence in what I was doing. It was in Liverpool, a city that I absolutely adore, and I love the culture there. I love the little bit of militancy that there is there. I love the passion that they have for fairness and, you know, doing the right thing. And as part of living in that city, I started to get involved in the arts and cultures, and I co-founded a charity there called Culture Pool, which was about encouraging people to attend art and culture events that they might not feel that they can have access to, because equity of access is another passion of mine.
No, that sounds like, no wonder they said, yep, you've certainly got the goods, we'll let you in, because life experience counts for a hell of a lot, doesn't it?
Right, yeah. I was so nervous. Yeah. I was so nervous about doing that degree. And I went to have an interview with somebody saying to them, I think I need to do a foundational course before I start my first year of university. And when we were chatting, and, you know, my experience of Culture Pool, but also a great organization in Liverpool called Philosophy in Pubs. And that's where, you know, it's a semi-formal structured getting together where people talk about philosophical questions. You know, what is happiness? Can we have happiness without sadness, and things like that? But in the pubs, and the people that I met through there, these highly educated people, educated both through the educational system, but knowledgeable and intellectual people, but from life as well, really gave me the confidence, to do the degree.
So interesting hearing you talking about your past experiences when you're over in England, and then what you know, the area of passion that you finally discovered yourself, and how you broaden your you know, understanding of that with the work that you're doing now. And we'll get on to that sort of later in the episode. But it's just really interesting to, you know, for me to be able to put all the puzzles together, because it makes it very clear on why you're doing what you're doing now.
Yeah, it does when you reflect on it, right? You know, that kind of going back to that first job of being caught up in the politics. It was really awful for an 18-year-old. And also really, but also just remembering now, even not just the politics, but the culture of the workplace. I was 18 when I started work there, so 1989. And I remember turning up for work wearing trousers, and then somebody pulled me aside and told me I couldn't wear trousers for work. You know, there was just, I know, right? And I was like, what?
Wow.
And so even all that, where I'm just going, this can't be right. And I think I've always been that counterpoint person, the person just in the meeting, just putting their hand up going, this, can I just sense check this, you know, kind of thing. This got to be a better way of doing this. And that's, I think that is one of the themes that goes through everything that I've done.
Yes. Right. So you're in Australia, you've studied your master's, and then, like, I'm assuming you've continued to work in non-for-profit organisations. Is that what's?
Yeah, I studied full time because as part of my visa, you know, I couldn't work full time. But I was fortunate enough. My husband came over with me. He worked, I studied, and then afterwards, I did some work, and I worked for Life Education just for a short contract, which was really amazing to work with them. I didn't grow up with Healthy Harold, so it was fabulous to meet. Healthy Harold was my boss, you know. So,
Well, the people who are listening, on the whole, majority may not have gone through the classes with Healthy Harold, but certainly their children would have. Well, they would have heard of Healthy Harold. And as a teacher, Healthy Harold, that was a very big part of every year, you know, when the van arrived and the Life Ed, taking the children in.
And I found it wonderful to see that as part of, you know, the love that people had for Harold, and the kind of memories that they'd have for him. But, he's a big star. We used to go into schools with Healthy Harold.
Yes.
And we had to have minders because the children would be so excited coming up to him. And I remember, before I did this, before I'd been into a school with Harold, and people would say, "Oh, we need somebody just to watch out for him." I was like, "Really?" And then the children would lose their minds when Harold turned up. So it was wonderful to see that, and I just think it was such an innovative way, which I'm really passionate as well. Innovative way of teaching and educating in a way that information can be sticky. Can really work with different approaches like Harold.
Yes. And so what, Luan, with life was going along nice and peacefully, and then at what point did you get that big drop of a diagnosis of breast cancer?
Diagnosis.
Yeah.
Well, I'd started another master's in information studies. Equity of access to things and information is, I'm really passionate about. And I'd started a master's in information studies, and I was working at NIDA, the National Institute of Dramatic Arts, in their archive and records department, because that complemented my studies. And during that year, so this is 2017, I just kept feeling generally unwell. So I never noticed anything wrong with my breasts. I never noticed a lump, a bump, or anything like that. But I just kept being unwell, and I just have like a cough or something like that. And I just couldn't shake it, and it was affecting work. I was contracted for work, so it was impacting the work that I was doing through that year. And then I remember, I think it was October 2017, I saw Sam Johnson from Love Your Sister on the TV. And I think his sister Connie had just died. And he was talking about Love Your Sister. He was talking about breast cancer, and he talked about mammograms. And he talked about how mammograms were free for over 40s in Australia. And I just thought, I just keep being unwell. We have something called an MOT in the UK, where you take your car each year to get it checked over. And I thought, I'm just going to go for a body MOT. And one of the things I'm going to get checked is my breasts. I'm going to go to breast screen and have a mammogram.
And this being your very first mammogram?
Very first mammogram. I was aged 46. Yeah. I wouldn't have been called for a mammogram to the age of 50. In New South Wales, you're not called to the age of 50, although you can go for one at the age of 40. And that's free. And I just thought, I'll just take myself off. Yeah, first mammogram without a care in the world. So I, poodled off to go and have my mammogram, and was absolutely floored. I was shocked when I was called back because they'd noticed something. I just could not believe that I had that call back. It was just something I was ticking off. So I was called back to breast screen. And just to flag as well, as part of that, at that time, because I think this is where my progression to where I am now kind of starts, is that I got a letter calling me back, and it came back a few weeks after I'd had my mammogram. And I couldn't believe I had a letter. I was like, we've all got mobile phones. They've got my mobile number. Why has this letter arrived weeks after my mammogram? And I can remember calling up and talking to them about what was going to happen at the next stage, which was, as being called in for a more thorough examination and potentially a biopsy. And I called them to talk to them about that. And I also said to them, this person that I am putting my finger up, why have you sent me a letter if you're calling me back? There's been a delay in you calling me back because this has come via, pigeon post, when really you could have got me back sooner. And they had lots of reasons for this. Some women we deal with don't have mobile phones. They tend to be older women that we're dealing with, and they don't do that kind of tech. So anyway, I went back and I went for my biopsy, and I had my examination, and I had 2 core biopsies, and that's where they kind of shoot something into the breast tissue and take a core, almost, if you feel like how they take a sample when they're doing exploratory things, in the ice in the Antarctic. They kind of take a core of that out, and as part of that appointment, which my husband came with me, but they're not allowed into kind of the biopsy room with you in case they kind of have a funny turn and then they become the focus rather than you. So my husband is sat outside. I'm outside the room. I'm inside the room. And I asked the doctor, look, do you think it's breast cancer? And she said, look, we are concerned and it is most likely breast cancer. And although we were waiting for the pathology to come back, I had more than one area of concern, and what had looked, come through on the ultrasound, she was kind of, yeah, it kind of is. We do believe that it is breast cancer. So I'm sat in this room and my world's absolutely falling apart. My husband is in the waiting room. And unbeknownst to me, the breast surgeon who'd seen us before that appointment, before my biopsy, and he'd seen the results of the ultrasound. I'd sort of said to my husband, we are concerned. We think it's breast cancer. So my husband sat in the waiting room thinking, oh my God, how am I going to talk to her about this? I'm sat in this biopsy examination room. My heart's breaking. It's cracked open. And then I'm thinking, oh my God, how am I going to tell Vinny? And I pull myself together, come out of the room, and we just kind of nod at each other. And we get in a cab, don't say anything, and then we go home. And then sit on the sofa, and that's when I tell him what I've been told, and he tells me what he's been told. And it was just absolutely devastating. I think any diagnosis is shocking. I think because I had no inkling whatsoever that there was anything wrong. I just took a punt. I'd gone to tick off the fact that everything was okay. I hadn't gone with a symptom or a sign, but there was a sign that I'd missed, and I want to flag it because I had an indent in my breast. So listeners may or may not be aware, it's not always a lump that you have, an indication that any change in your breast needs to be looked at. But an indication of something, that needs investigating is a change that can include dimpling, discharge from the nipple changing direction, or something like what I had, which is I had a little dent in my breast, but it was on my bra line. And when I looked at my breasts in the bathroom, the light came from above. So it was in the shade and you couldn't feel it. So I had a sign, but I didn't know about it. So we're sat at home, got this, it's most likely breast cancer, but come back in 4 or 5 days for your pathology results, because pathology is they say king, but I think it's queen. Pathology is queen. And that's when, after the shock of what had happened, I realized I needed to get a hustle on and needed to start to take some control of this. And I started to make phone calls to people who might be able to help me.
Yeah, that must have been an absolutely surreal moment for you, and for you, like devastating, yet real. It would be, how is this happening? There'd be so many emotions going through.
It all and it's all as if it collapses into that absolute moment of, the before and after, right? With there's kind of, we talk about it in the cancer community, BC, before cancer, and AD after diagnosis, right? And it does, and we all know where we were at that point. It kind of becomes imprinted, I think, upon your being, your psyche, your heart, for me anyway.
Yes.
But I was thankful that the doctor did say to me, oh, it most likely is. She listened to me and she answered my question. She didn't give me a definitive, it's most likely, but it did help me start to get my head around it, really. Yeah.
That's it. When you're a woman in the 40s trying to come to terms with something like that comes out of the blue, would be very difficult. And a couple of our past guests I've had on have had a breast cancer story that they've shared with us as well. And every woman's story is different. Where they are, at what point in their life, that is different. The type of cancer is different, therefore the type of treatment is different. So if you're, if you're happy to, can you walk us through your particular treatment plan, what that looked like for you, and therefore, I suppose it takes us into that next part of your journey that we can talk about as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, you're absolutely right. It is a very individualized, as you say, individualized, personal, whatever's happening in your life, priorities, values, needs. But the pathology, the type of cancer, I didn't know at the time there was these different types of subtypes of cancer and the subtypes and etc. So um, I was diagnosed with invasive pleomorphic lobular cancer. Now, invasive lobular is known as the sneaky cancer. I think they're all sneaky, but particularly because it doesn't necessarily, form a lump. It may do, but it's more like it lacks an adhesion protein, so it can grow single cell file, almost like a spider's web. That's how they describe it. And that's why you might see a pull before you see a lump or something like that. Not in all cases, but that is one way that it can present. So I had invasive pleomorphic lobular cancer, and in more than one area of the breast. So it was, it was extensive, and my treatment path for me, and everybody has personalized treatment path. And this is what's amazing, right? With the developments we've got on oncological treatment and care, is that we've got more personalized treatment paths. But my personal treatment path was neoadjuvant chemotherapy. So I had chemotherapy first, and then I had a mastectomy, and then I had radiotherapy. And so that was through 2018. I was really fortunate. I started at the end of 2017 with my chemotherapy. My medical oncologist, I was diagnosed the end of October, beginning November. It was all happening, and they got me in to have treatments in December. So to really kind of get me in as soon as possible. So I had chemotherapy, and then the mastectomy that I had is called a skin-sparing mastectomy, and I chose to have a single mastectomy. And a skin-sparing mastectomy is where I knew I wanted to have a breast reconstruction later, so I didn't want to go flat. But because I was having radiotherapy, it wasn't advised for me to have that reconstruction at that time, immediate, longer-term reconstruction. So I had skin-sparing mastectomy, which is where they put in an expander, and what that is the expander just makes a pocket ready for you having your longer term reconstruction at the time. It is a form of reconstruction, but it's not a long term thing. Yeah. It's kind of
just the one breast. So I've got it in clear in mind. We're just talking at this point in time a singular breast that
single mastectomy, or unilateral that it's sometimes called. And I'd had scans to check if there was cancer in the other breast, and there was nothing that showed there. So that was the choice that I made, to have single at that time. And then radiotherapy, and that took me, I think, to about July or August in 2018. And I had amazing care. I had amazing treatments with an amazing, fabulous team here in Sydney. And I was really fortunate. I lived down the road from my hospital. I kind of got the bus to chemotherapy and walked back, because it's shown that exercise can help improve. Now it's being suggested that it helps improve the efficacy of your chemotherapy, but also that it can help alleviate side effects. So I was really keen to do that. So that was my treatment at that time. And I elected to have what's known as an autologous or own tissue reconstruction, which is where they take tissue from your own body and use that to reconstruct your breast. And I chose to have a Dieppe flap reconstruction, whereas they take part of your abdominal tissue, or some of your abdominal tissue, tummy tissue, and they use that to reconstruct your breast, and that involves microsurgery. So I had that a year after my mastectomy. So in 2019, I had Dieppe flap reconstruction, and I stayed with a single reconstruction. Some people elect to have the other breast removed, and I decided not to. I don't have an increased genetic risk. I had genetic testing done, and that was the decision that was right for me. So I had Dieppe flap reconstruction in 2019.
Yeah, and so you're obviously a person who loves learning, and so in conjunction with the advice that you got from your expert medical team, did that send you down a path of learning as much as you can about
Mm,
your type of cancer, the type of care that you know, it could be available to you, so then you can
yeah,
talk to your doctors a little bit more?
yeah,
How did all that?
yeah. So I had information that I'd got from my doctors, and also from resources that they'd advised. BCNA at the time have a journey kit. I think they still have some form of that, but it may be digital now. I'm not sure if it's still a physical thing, but I got a physical thing, which I liked because it was a book and I could put sticky notes in it and things like that. So I looked to BCNA and to the Cancer Council for information. And we have a great resource here called Reclaim Your Curves, which is a Facebook group where people share their experience. And what I did, which has now become something that I advocate for, is I took the information that I was being given from my team. I did my own research to kind of get evidence-based and evidence-informed resources. I looked to the community, what other people with a lived experience had done, and then I reflected on what was important for me. You know, did I want to stay flat after my mastectomy, or did I want a reconstruction? And what type of reconstruction? What was important to me? So I looked at those kind of broadly those three areas. But it was hard. You know, invasive pleomorphic lobular cancer is a subtype of invasive lobular cancer. And I think it's approximately 1% of cancers, breast cancers, are invasive pleomorphic.
Wow.
Yeah. And there was a lot of, I found it really hard to find information out about that. And I remember once coming across a website and it gave me lots of information, but it was really dire. It was really dire. The prognosis was dire. But it wasn't until I got to the end of this website page that then it said, "Oh, please note that this information is really out of date." And but it was at the bottom that the disclaimer was, and I was like, "Too late."
Holy.
Yeah, I just read through it and was like, I talked to my husband about, I remember saying to my husband the first Christmas, of my diagnosis, and I was having chemotherapy, and I remember saying to him, "Do you know what? If I die, I know you'll need help, like sorting everything out, but please, will you clear out my undies drawer? Don't let anyone else do it."
Oh.
But that's how because I'd been reading this awful information about pleomorphic. And so, yeah, so I went through all that, but I did try to bring together those three different areas of research. But I also had some advice. So my mastectomy was done by my breast surgeon, but because I had a DF flap reconstruction, it's a different type of surgeon for me that was doing that. It was a plastic surgeon specialized in microsurgery and DF flap reconstruction. And part of my consults with them, they said to me, so this is 2018, they said to me, look to America for information about this surgery because there's a lack of information in Australia about this type of surgery. Taking their lead, I did that. And there's an amazing charity in the US called DEEP Foundation, or they pronounce it Deep Sea Foundation. And I looked to them. They had a fabulous range of resources, videos, and a community that I could look to. So yeah, I really started to gather all that information and make a list of questions. I had spreadsheets. I kept with that, right, being taught in my early research statistician days, pre-spreadsheets, but at least it was a grid thing going on. Yeah. I kind of took all that, and I informed my question asking with my research. I wasn't informing, making decisions before I spoke to my team, but I did all that research to inform the questions that I then took to my team and had, on the whole, not always, but on the whole, two-way dialogue with them.
Mm. And so what was your experience post-reconstruction then?
So post-reconstruction, I've had more than one surgery for reconstruction. I had the DF in 2018, and the pandemic came. 2019, I had the DF. 2019, I had the DF. And then I had another surgery in 2020. It's often the case that you may need more than one surgery, depending on what you want for your results. But in 2019, when I was recovering from my DEP, I started to use Instagram and I started to microblog, I call it daily. Started posting daily on Instagram because when I'd had my mastectomy, and then a year later, when I was going in for my DEP, I kind of didn't really acknowledge how far I'd come and how well I'd done after my mastectomy. And I remember saying to my husband, "Oh, I didn't really, I thought I could have done things better." And he was like, "You did fabulously." So I decided I was going to sort of post every day, 100 days DEP after my surgery, really as a self-serving thing to me, to kind of almost like journaling. But if I put it on Instagram, it held me accountable because I'd said I was going to do it every day. So I did it every day. And a lot of what I was putting out there was about, it was about me, right? It was about and a lot of it was about my mental recovery. But what I found is that people started to really interact with that and respond to that. They didn't know about DEP. They maybe didn't know about the importance of exercise to breast cancer recovery or treatment. And yeah, it opened up a world of, and it is a world, it's a global community, cancer community that is on Instagram. But many people, if they haven't got it, they don't know that community is out there. And I started to share my story there and connect with just a fabulous community. Initially breast cancer reconstruction, but it has become a wider cancer community that, where we're all united by really hearing those words, sorry, it's cancer, but different types of cancer. So I started sharing my story on there, and then that's evolved into me becoming a patient advocate for reconstruction after mastectomy and informed shared decision making for patients.
Yes. Isn't it amazing how something so devastating for you has then turned into something that is bringing you so much joy and helping others? It always, from adversity, there's always something that comes, positive
Yeah,
that can come from it. It's a matter of finding that and using it. And so I just
yeah.
love what you're doing now. So would you like to tell and share all the sorts of amazing things that you're doing now? You've just given us a little glimmer, but what you're doing
Thank
for
you.
other women and women not just in Australia, but worldwide.
Yeah,
Share.
thank you. Yeah, it is interesting when you reflect, isn't it? Because when I was first diagnosed, I kept my diagnosis private. And then, 100 days DF, I'm sort of putting pictures of my boobs on, on Instagram.
All dignity's gone by
And
that
that's what I'm
stage, but
known for
Lord.
now. Well, the what happened was I connected with a plastic surgeon who's based in Sydney, isn't my surgeon, but I connected with him, and we, conscious that even though I'd been told when I had my DEP that to look to America, in 2018 for information, even still in 2019 and 2020, there is a lack of information around breast reconstruction, or there are barriers to access to the information about breast reconstruction in Australia. And Australia had relatively lower rates of breast reconstruction after a mastectomy compared to similar countries. And that's, underpinned by research. So I was chatting to a plastic surgeon. We decided to do a breast recon 101 live Q&A on Instagram. So this was an Instagram live, first in Australia, where chatting to the plastic surgeon, Dr. Joe Dusseldorp, who specializes in DEP, he, just was open to it. I'd never met him. We just chatted, and we hosted a live where the audience could ask Joe anything about reconstruction. And it was so successful, we had to shut it down because, it's like, okay, we've gone on for an hour now. I really need to let Dr. Joe go. And, but it obviously showed that there was a need. And through the year after, I did a series of Breast Recon 101 live Q&As on Instagram with different health professionals, different surgeons about different types of surgery and recovery. And I also chatted to some amazing women in our community who shared their experiences on Instagram lives. And then the feedback that I was getting is that, people were loving the content. They wanted to access it wherever and whenever. And so I launched Rewritten Me, which is Australia's first podcast about reconstruction after mastectomy, talking to leading professionals, surgeons, healthcare professionals about recovery, nutrition, and again, talking to those inspiring women from our community who shared their story. because, hearing about the lived experience needs to be taken alongside, just like I did with my research, needs to be taken alongside the kind of the medical side of things as well. And that's where you're looking at the medical outcomes, patient-centered care, lived experience, what's important to you, your values, your how do you want to live your life, emotional, mental considerations, human-centered care. So it's bringing that all together. And Rewritten Me was launched a couple of years ago, 2 seasons done now, and it's just been a big learning for me. I've never podcasted before, but is meeting a need for sure. I know from the feedback that I get, whether that's testimonials, but also, I do some informal mentoring in the background with our community, and they're finding it really useful to help support their decision making with their team, but also from the live Q&As and from Rewritten Me. Not only are they gaining information to help make their decisions, but they're seeing that you can have a two-way dialogue with your medical professional. And it's okay. In fact, you have a right to ask questions, because you need to ask questions to be fully informed, to give informed consent.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the feedback that I was getting. And it's just been hopefully, and the feedback I'm getting, it is meeting a need that there still is in Australia. Rewritten Me is out there, but we still need more resources about reconstruction options after a mastectomy, because even though Rewritten Me is getting information out there, and I do it as on a voluntary basis, like you do with this podcast, it's our give back or share back. There's just me doing it, right? We need to see more information out there with other organizations. But I launched that a couple of years ago. But one of the themes that was coming through from that was a theme of self-advocacy. So self-advocacy, advocating for yourself and for your health so that you can make a healthcare decision, a treatment decision, supportive care decision that is right for you, that's and what's most important to you. And I would hear from women that self-advocacy was something that they did when things went wrong, or when they had a disagreement with a healthcare professional. Now, we need to speak up when things aren't going the way that we want. But it was interesting that it was seen as, I think one of my guests, she said, I was balls to the wall self-advocating. And I was like, that's brilliant. But for me, I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, well, self-advocacy really, I think, needs to be something that's proactive, that happens before you get to that stage. And when I thought about the work that I was doing, it was, well, I am a patient advocate. I advocate on behalf of patients for, increased access to information about breast reconstruction after mastectomy, or reconstruction after mastectomy. People are staying flat. And really the work that I was doing, I was being an advocate for self-advocacy. It was very much in the breast reconstruction and reconstruction space. But actually those skills that we were talking about and the self-advocacy is transferable to any health setting.
I love that. And so therefore, being the type of woman that you are, you're clearly very self-driven with a strong passion. It's led you onto, I won't say a different path. It's still the same path, but you're broadening that path. The world is now opening up, because you're not only talking about women who are going through this type of cancer and the options available for reconstruction surgery for them. It's opened up so many other, I can see this, I can see that. So would you share with everybody what this next new iteration is going to look like for you in 2025 and going forward?
Yeah, so I feel like it's a flex, because anyone that I've spoken to, they've kind of said, you already do that, don't you? But it is a flex, and it's kind of maybe bringing self-advocacy to the forefront. So self-advocacy, for me in a health setting is to know you, to know your rights, to know your wants, needs, values, and priorities, and to be able to effectively and respectfully communicate them to your team so that you get the healthcare that's right for you and meets those priorities and needs. Now, that's not taking away the role of the medical professional in that kind of dynamic, or that you need to become this subject matter expert in whatever cancer, chronic illness, or, health setting that you're in. It's about being able to have informed, shared decision making for the human-centered care that incorporates and considers what's involved for that human-centered care. So this year, I'm so excited to be launching the Regarding Me podcast. So Regarding Me is a podcast that's there to empower women to advocate for themselves and for their health so that they can make an informed, shared decision about their healthcare that's, aligns with what's most important to them. So if you've had a health crisis or a health challenge like, a cancer diagnosis or a chronic illness, as we mentioned earlier, we are getting more individualized care, more personalized care. That often involves many different medical health practitioners and can often be over different centers or different places, it could be fragmented. So it's really important for you to maybe understand who does what, where they do it, what their roles are. That's just initially. And for you to be able to sort of navigate through that. So Regarding Me is a podcast that's going to give you the skills, the tips, the knowledge, the tools, the takeaways, the confidence to be able to advocate for yourself, to be your own self-health advocate, so that you can navigate that with more ease. Now, we're not taking away the diagnosis, okay? We can't do anything about that. That's happened, but you can choose how you respond and how you navigate this health challenge. And really, those skills, they're transferable to any part of your life. If we're talking about effective communication skills, listening skills, how do you respectfully disagree with somebody? How do you, this is the one that gets a lot of us, how do you ask for a second opinion? Right? Things like that. How do you remain calm in those moments of chaos when you're receiving some news that is absolutely, like I said, collapsing your world like it did for me? You're probably still going to need to take in some information. Now, medical professionals are trained in communicating in different ways, but some do it better than others.
I think everyone can identify with having received some news either for themselves or with a loved one. There are some doctors or as you said, medical professionals who are absolutely phenomenal at this. Others, it is not their strength.
No.
And I suppose that's a human condition as well. We can't be good at everything, and if they're good at doing what they're doing and to help you get better, but you really do need that when you're at your lowest point.
Yeah, you do. And to be able to attend to yourself, but also attend to maybe what's being said to you, and take some of that in. As I said, it's the responsibility isn't all on you, but it's trying to find those moments. Can you, where you can bring yourself and center yourself, so there is a response rather than a reaction. How can you? And it's not just with medical professionals, right? We think about this holistic care. It may be that you need to have discussions with your social network, your support network. You might be making decisions about your treatment or care that they might not disagree with, but also you might need to let them know, what is happening that might upset them as well. So how do you communicate with those? And you might be making changes in your life as a result of your diagnosis that don't. They don't really understand why.
Yes.
So it's about being able to have those conversations, the difficult conversations with people. And so it's kind of Regarding Me is a podcast to support women who've had a cancer diagnosis, but we're not actually talking about cancer, right? We're talking about the skills and the behaviors that can help you just make that a little bit easier so that you're getting the care that's right for you.
That's it. It's offering information to empower women, isn't it? And their extended family or support network that they've got around them to help them as they're
Yeah.
going through this so empowering at your lowest point when you feel like all power's been taken away from you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So those
Yeah.
skills is so very crucial.
Yeah. Yeah. And that doesn't mean you need to be like, balls to the wall,
Oh, of course
self-advocating
not.
all the
Yes.
time. And it may be, that you it's about knowing you. That's the first part of self-advocacy for me, knowing you. And that involves self-awareness and self-reflection. And we do talk about that on the podcast. We've got mindfulness coaches to help with keeping calm. We've got other coaches that can help with, reflecting on you and what's important to you and being aware. But knowing what's right for you might be about saying to somebody, I don't have any questions at the time and I don't want to know any more information. If that's important to you, that's fine.
Mm.
Another time you might say, I do have questions and I want to know all this. And that can change as you go through your treatment
Yes.
pathway. And that's okay. You don't, there's not just one fix for it. And everybody does things differently, but it's about having the confidence and knowing that's your right as well for you to respectfully communicate that to your team and to let them know that this is how you want it to go.
No, that's fabulous. And all of the links to your two podcasts will be in the show notes, as well as ways that listeners can connect with you and follow you on, say, Instagram, and just see your story and see it all unfold as well. So this is important information to share again for listeners. And if you know somebody who is going through a cancer diagnosis or going through any other chronic illness that's requiring a fairly large team to help manage and get you through that, then these podcasts are just so important for you to listen to. Also, during our chat today, you were talking about, your past, what you've done in the past. And I'm sure the listeners can now see all of those little pieces have really helped develop what you're doing now into
Mm,
something pretty amazing. So I just love
mm.
how our past can help inform our present and then our future as well. So I loved your story.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, it is fascinating when you look at that, isn't it? I remember thinking that once, and then I watched Game of Thrones, and there's spoiler alert, but towards the end of one of those episodes, one of the characters said, everything that's happened before me has brought me to here.
Yeah.
And that seems like a simple concept, but it's actually a really profound one as well, isn't it? When you reflect
Yes, absolutely.
on where we land,
Mm.
but we're still in movement, aren't we? As you
Yeah.
said, for the future.
And thank you for taking on this whole role of sharing this information with other people, because I know, having my own podcast, it does take time, it does take effort, and a lot of your own money to create
Mm.
these things. So for what you're doing, and what's going to be following in the weeks, months, years ahead, is going to have a huge impact.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. It's like I said earlier, I guess, when that job I did as an IT trainer, I did advocate for myself. I did it well sometimes. I didn't do it very well at other times. I had some good experiences as part of my treatment, and I had some not so good ones. And
Yeah.
I think I don't want others to have the not so good ones that I had. So hopefully, by putting this podcast out, I can help ease that and help it just be a little bit less stressy and a less anxiety, and but more in control for listeners.
Yes, oh, I'm sure that's going to happen. So, just a couple of little wrap-up questions before we end our podcast and our chat together today. Luan, what are you most enjoying about this stage of life that you're in right now?
Um, the confidence in me. I feel like I want to drop an F-bomb, but I'm not. But like the confidence in me, in that, and it came with my diagnosis as well, not just the life stage that I'm at. Absolutely knowing what's right for me and where those boundaries are. It's taken a bit of work to be able to, assert the boundaries respectfully. So, but yeah, confidence confidence in me, and I know me better than anybody else.
Yes. And that knowing is becoming stronger
The
and stronger.
knowing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and no, absolute knowing. Very early on, it happened as part of my treatment for breast cancer. I knew who I wanted to know about my story, that small group, and I knew how I wanted it to play out. Um, and when I say that, obviously, we want a good outcome from our results, medical results, but I mean how I wanted to deal with professionals, how I wanted them to deal with me. So yeah, the knowing, it's all powerful, isn't it? It's like your
Mm,
me power, right? We talk
absolutely.
about empowered. I like flipping it. It's like your me power.
Yeah. Well, thousands of years ago, written down was know thyself, and it's just such an important part of, really, I suppose, this stage of life is knowing who you are. Sadly, some people get to the end of their life and they still don't know,
Yeah.
because it is powerful. But once you've had a life-changing diagnosis like you had, do you think that sped up that whole process of, right, I'm really going to be working out what I want, who I am, and where I want to be next?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it crystallized like where I want to be next. I think, I feel like I evolved and fell into patient advocacy. It was like right in the 100 days DM, the conversation with Dr. Joe, shall we do a live? And that kind of seems like a really natural progression, but wasn't anything that I had on my cards. I did not want to do an Instagram live to start off with. I don't like being on video. I don't, it wasn't anything. And the reason I did it was nobody else was doing it. And my community were being failed because people who should have been, in my view, creating content weren't. So I don't feel necessarily that it did at that point. I do now. I feel now with regarding me, I absolutely know this is right. I think the diagnosis crystallized for me what was important for me and helped me recognize my strengths. I've shared this previously in my writing and things like that, but I mean, I never dwelled on having a life-threatening illness. I never thought that I was going to have one.
Mm.
But you know what? Maybe had an inkling that, if something like that happened to me, I thought I would crumble. I really did think that I would absolutely. I was devastated, but I really, and I did crumble at times, but I thought that I'd be on the floor and never get back up again. I did fall, but I did get back up. And I think what it crystallized for me, my diagnosis, is that I'm not a half empty person. I'm not half empty. What am I wanting to say? Half glass empty. I can't
Yeah.
think of my words now. One of the challenges of my treatment fallout. I'm not a glass half empty. I'm a glass half full. And I really can do, we have those things that happen to us. And I say this to a lot of people I work with commercially and with my clients, so what, right? This has happened. So what are we going to do about it? And I think that's, underpins everything that I do.
Yeah. And apart from your advocacy work now that you're absolutely passionate about, what else are you looking forward to in this next half of life?
I'm looking forward to settling into my new home. So although I've been in Australia for 11 years now. We rented for quite a number of years. That was all interrupted with COVID. My husband worked for Qantas, so that kind of put a kibosh really on us kind of buying our home. We are citizens here now and feel very settled. And we moved into a new home last year, and I'm really looking forward to just breathing. Where you can buy something and it's going to go in that spot. You're not trying to think, well, it's only fitting there for the next couple of years. I'm looking forward to that, and yeah, and some of the commercial work that I've got lined up, some of the clients that I work with have got really exciting things happening this year, and I'm really looking forward to working with them as well.
Fantastic. Well, it sounds like 2025 is going to be incredibly bright, and therefore the years after will be as well. So, finally, what do you hope that 80-year-old Luan is going to say about current day Luan?
Ooh, oh gosh, that I did what I could. I think I'm happy with that. That I did what I could. That I took the opportunities that I could, and I made the opportunities that I could as well.
Hmm. Yeah, I see that. I can
Yeah,
hear her
yeah,
saying, yeah.
yeah. I don't. Yeah, that I did what I could, and because I do believe we have, opportunities, and I think we have a responsibility in the way that we respond to life. And that I did what I could. It was always a theme through my treatment. I tried not to make decisions. I tried to make decisions that if I look back, it's like I made the decision with everything that I had to hand. I made the decision that I could at the time and with the no regrets. And I think, I don't want to be having those regrets at 80.
Exactly. You don't want to be dying wondering, do you, about what you could have done?
Not wondering about that. I want to be wondering at the world and wondering at the life that we've enjoyed and that we've shared and all the people that I've met along the way.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I've absolutely loved our conversation together, and I'm so glad that I've met you and we've had this conversation to share with our listeners today. So thanks, Luan.
Oh, thank you, Jo. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me to be a guest. I really, really am honoured. It's been wonderful. I'm so pleased that we've met virtually. I can't wait till we hopefully meet in person over a coffee sometime.
That would be fabulous. That would be
fabulous. But really, truly, thank you so much. It's wonderful to be a guest. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you feel inspired to make the next chapter of your life the best one yet. And remember to share this episode with someone else who would love it, and connect with me on Instagram or LinkedIn at Jo Clark Coaching. All the links and the details from today's episode are in the show notes or at joclarkcoaching.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please follow or subscribe this show on your favourite podcast app and leave a 5-star rating and review. This helps more midlife women find these empowering conversations. I can't wait to chat with you next week. Until then, take care and keep creating a life that you love.